Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 107th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our discussion panels twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political discussion. Today our panel will discuss religion's role in modern American culture. We'll discuss how it has changed over time and how the Constitution has been interpreted differently. Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, a retired senior research chemist. On his left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is Jerry Ritzman, founder of Ritzman Pharmacies. I'm glad I was able to say Ritzman right twice in a row. Ron, do you think that the courts have gone too far in restricting the public use of religious symbols and practices? Or has it just become more faithful to the original intent of the First Amendment?
Some cases yes, some cases no.
Oh, Ron.
I'm cursed with the ability to want to see both sides of an issue, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, I can understand, I think, where the founders were coming from here. They came from Britain, which was not exactly a theocracy, but had a very strong Church of England background. They were in Pennsylvania, which was founded by Quakers, who were basically cast out of England to start a new life. They were in the midst of the Pennsylvania Dutch, Amish and Mennonites. And I happened to be a member of the Mennonite Church. I joined that. That started in the Protestant Reformation, through the Protestant Reformation, when three gentlemen got together in each other's homes in order to read the Bible in their own language. Gutenberg had published his German language Bible. And in the course of their study, they decided that infant baptism should not be the way to go. They should have adult believers' baptism. And that put them in direct contact with Roman Catholic Austria, because in Roman Catholic Austria, when you were baptized into the church, you therefore became a member of the Austrian citizenry. Mm-hmm.
You became a member of the church as an infant.
As an infant.
Right.
You became then a member of the state. So that the state had complete control over who their citizens were. Well, consequently, they were persecuted for a number of years, and over time, many migrated to Pennsylvania, which had a very tolerant policy toward things. So, besides that, many of the founders were deists. That meant that they believed that God had set up the world and let it go, and people were free to follow their own rights, and that religions were primarily a construction of people. They're set up just like governments in order to promote harmonious living among their members. Had really nothing to do with God, particularly. They were a construction of people. So I can see where they came from here. They don't want to have government promoting a particular religion. On the other hand, it's fair that they should not restrict its use. Because, so, today we say, well, that should go into all aspects of our beliefs here. It says Congress shall not do it. That doesn't really say anything about your local board having prayer at the beginning of the meeting. It doesn't say anything about putting the 10 Commandments in the courthouse. But it's interpreted that that is a expression of a particular religious belief, and therefore should be outlawed under the terms of the Constitution.
It shows a preference.
Yes, showing a preference to that. Prayer in schools. And they came out largely by somebody like Madeline
Murray
O'Hare. So probably what we should, and I think that's probably fair. I know plenty of people who don't have any church relationships, plenty of people who profess to be agnostic or atheist. They shouldn't be forced to sit and listen to a prayer in school if they don't want to. Have a moment of silence for each to commune within his own way with, prayer is pretty prevalent when exam time is there, I understand. But
everybody finds it.
So we have a whole tradition of religious intolerance because one group over another. In years past, Roman Catholics are not very welcome in the South among all the Methodists and the Baptists. Disgraceful handling of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in this country in their early days, until they managed to find a home in Utah. More accepted now, but think of all the flack about the candidacy of Mitt Romney. You know, is he going to be suitable? Similar would be the candidacy of John F. Kennedy.
I was pleased at the lack of flack on Romney.
True.
There was a little bit.
There was a little
much.
bit. There was a little
Yeah.
bit. We've come some distance.
Yeah.
We've come
yeah.
some distance. Now, come to things like, should we have Christmas trees in a public square? Should we say Merry Christmas to each other? Some things are ingrained, whether they're religious in background or not, they're so ingrained in our culture that it's stupid to not use them.
Yes.
You want to say Happy Holidays, fine, but you know, I have some good friends in the Jewish community who celebrate both Hanukkah and Christmas.
Yeah.
Because it's a secular holiday as much as anything else, and most people.
Bryan, as a Mormon, were you particularly sensitive to any criticism of Romney's candidacy?
You know, I just think that from within our own party, I was a little disturbed that Romney wasn't considered pure enough. He wasn't a conservative enough. You know, we had Romney Care, and they beat that horse to death because
Yeah.
what he had done as governor. And some of his, you know, I guess when you actually have to lead, you have to compromise. And there is a faction, I think, in both parties that believe you either do it our way or you don't do it at all, the highway. And they tagged him and they smeared him enough, you know, and look what we got.
Yeah, you answered my question. You were more sensitive to the negative feedback on him than I was. I saw very little.
Yeah, I don't think I was sensitive as far as his religion, because it was never, you know, that seemed to be sort of a plus.
I gotcha.
It was his politics that people just didn't, within our own party.
Yeah.
He just wasn't conservative enough. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't so far right of center in our party that he just couldn't get that support, and so, you know, he didn't really stand a chance. So.
I didn't mean to get you off track there.
No, I think this is a great topic because I've been reading some of, I don't know if you've heard of Claire Booth Luce.
Yes. She
and
was Secretary of Treasury at one time under Eisenhower.
She was a congresswoman.
She was in Eisenhower's cabinet.
And wrote and has wrote historically about some things. And I think this quote really clears some things up for me. And basically, I'd like to just quote her. It says, "What the secularists are increasingly demanding in their disingenuous way is that religious people, when they act politically, act only on secularist grounds. They are trying to equate acting on religion with establishing religion. And I repeat, the consequence of such logic is really to establish secularism. It is, in fact, to force the religious to internalize the major premise of secularism, that religion has no proper bearing on public affairs. A religious conviction is now a second-class conviction, expected to step deferentially to the back of the secular bus and not to get uppity about it." So basically, my feeling is Congress protects us from the establishment of religion. But if Ron wants to practice his religion, and because of that is one of his core beliefs, and that helps him act politically, we can't have two or three Rons, one in the public eye, one when he sits in the pew, and another when he's out there, you know, at work. So if he wants to, or Patty wants to express her religion, and that comes through as she's sitting on city council, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think we're trying to establish religion, whatever religion you are, it does focus and helps you focus on what things are important to you. And what we've seen recently in some of these judicial hearings, I'm just dumbfounded. When they asked Judge Gorsuch, I mean, they grilled him about his Catholic beliefs. And now we have the recent one, there's a judicial appointee, Senator Feinstein, has just taken this lady to the woodshed over her Catholic beliefs, the dogma that's so entrenched in her. I'm really concerned about that, because most people have some sort of Judeo-Christian religion, some sort of background. Whether you could be a Muslim, you could be Jewish, you could be Christian, and that does shape your opinions. You can't have two separate people when all of a sudden you start talking politics, and now you can't. You have to pretend that you're not going to be influenced by your core beliefs. I just think that's really, so far off base.
This is an interesting quote. Several years ago, Dr. Cesar Carino, who had recently been mayor of Wadsworth, came and spoke at our church. And someone asked him that very question. You're a Roman Catholic, how does that influence your political system? And he said just about what you said too. It doesn't mean that I follow that all the time, but this informs the way I look at the world. The Ten Commandments were written, I think, primarily as a means of keeping the community together. These are fundamental principles that promote harmony in the fellowship of the community.
Right.
Adultery, stealing, lying against your neighbor, that sort of thing. So that's important to have that in mind. I agree with you very much. But the establishment of it by making it an official resolution to do that in probably no.
So, Patty is a Roman Catholic and a member of the ruling elite in Wadsworth.
Ruling elite.
Where do you come down?
I think of myself as a strong believer in separation of church and state. Now, if you look at any of our laws, they were all really based upon Judeo-Christian tenets that we have. Where I have a problem is when religion is used to determine laws, though specifically, and say that I am X religion, and I believe this, so therefore you have to act in a certain way.
Is abortion a good point there?
Yeah, probably. That could be a good issue, so to discuss that, although I'm obviously anti-abortion, but which doesn't go along with my liberal classification, I know. But
I'd love to see you squirm like that.
No, I do, I'm very pro-life, but that's something that I have decided for myself based upon my religion.
Yeah.
My religion is very important to me. I feel it is my moral compass that allows me to act in a certain way and gives me those values that I think I need as a person, as a parent, as a grandparent, to pass along to my children and grandchildren. Where I have a problem is in too many cases I hear, well, the majority of the people in this area or this country or this state are of this religion, and so therefore we're going to set up our rules and laws and requirements based upon that. And that's exactly what the Constitution was trying to avoid.
That's one of the things that our founders were concerned about with a democracy.
Exactly. I mean, if you lived somewhere where Scientology were the main religion, which I'm sure you can find areas out in California where that's the case, would you be happy if when your child went to school everybody prayed to L. Ron Hubbard? And it would be required that you do it. I remember as a child, we were required to say the Lord's Prayer. Now, if you were Jewish, you still said the Lord's Prayer.
But was this in a Catholic school or a public school?
No, this was a public school. When I was a kid, everybody still said the Lord's Prayer was the first thing. And in Catholicism, the Lord's Prayer is not as long. We stop at a certain point before. Okay. And I remember as a child, you knew everybody in that room that was Catholic because at one point we all shut up and didn't say anything more.
For thine is the kingdom. And,
yes, exactly. We don't say that part as part of the Lord's Prayer. And so when you're required, I don't think it's the right of the public to tell me what to pray and how to pray, nor do I want in a public situation to have my children or myself be told how I should practice my faith. History of faith is another thing. You could take a history course in religion and learn all about all sorts of different religions, but not be told exactly how to pray, what to pray, or when to pray. Now, do I think that's important? Yes, which is why my kids both attended Catholic schools for a number of years of their education. But that was my option. I wanted them to have that in the schools, so therefore they attended Catholic schools.
Jerry, you look like you're thinking big thoughts.
Well, I'm thinking, but they aren't that big. It's interesting, Patty, you mentioned the Lord's Prayer. I had a friend who went to school in Pennsylvania, probably back in the 50s and 60s, and they had chapel every week that everybody attended, an assembly where they had chapel. And your example of having the Lord's Prayer, or whatever prayer that may be, is one of the examples of the things that I think the founders wanted to avoid, and that's the tyranny of the majority, not only in religion, but in everything. That's one thing that they were a little bit afraid of, is that, you know, we're going to have not the tyranny of a despot or a king, but the majority of the people are going to regulate and have a tyranny on them. So, but it's interesting how it's changed, and I think that, you know, one thing we haven't touched on is what is, in reading the summary that you sent, John, prior to this, the discussion points, is the question I have in my mind is, does an individual church or an individual denomination, should they be directly involved in the political process? You know, this is a political forum, and I guess that's some of the things I was thinking about running up to this show. You know, my opinion is that that an individual church or an individual denomination has no business directly involved in supporting one particular candidate, issue, anything like that.
Well, they risk their tax-exempt status if they do that, don't they?
Well, didn't Trump just overturn that? Or he started to.
I don't know, forgetting the tax status, I think that those particular people who are members of those particular congregations or denominations, they need to take their revelation of what their religion tells them and then act on it on an individual basis, not as a group. That's, I guess, the thoughts that I was having this week running up to this.
No, I think it's probably okay for a minister to say, "Oh, I support this particular policy," but he can't say, "Therefore, you should also."
Right, or this congregation comes out in support of this particular issue or that. I don't think that's the place. I think the people that are most influential, maybe in public life, are those that don't wear it on their sleeve, that they act it out, and in the decisions that they make and the way that they interact with the people that they come in contact with. And I think that's the role of the church in politics, and it stops there as far as the organized church or denomination.
I think I would add to that there are certain moral issues that churches feel inclined to speak out on, and because it overlaps into a political area, I think they have a right to, you know, abortion is one of those.
Oh, I agree, totally.
You know,
Well, the concept of adultery certainly taken a beating in the last couple of generations, hasn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And divorce.
But so there are certain moral issues that I think that churches will speak out on, but I don't think they can be silenced because of their belief. You know, I think I go back to that statement that just because that's your conviction doesn't limit you from expressing that in a political way. And I would agree that, you know, we don't want churches out there, you know, pushing different ideas and stuff, but there are certain moral issues that I think they really need to stand up on and stand for. And, you know.
And I know they do that. We'll get publications that'll say, you know, these are the tenets of the church, and this is how the church would propose you approach this issue, whether it be refugees, whether it be abortion, whatever. Then when you choose a candidate, you choose the candidate based upon, or hopefully that you would choose the candidate that hopefully most closely related to those particular stances on the church, and that's perfectly allowable.
Well, we just had, I think it was last year, this goes under the topic of religious freedom, I mean, there was a city council or a mayor out in California that was in the process of subpoenaing the sermon that was given at a particular church because they were going to press charges against that minister for hate speech. And basically he was preaching what their beliefs were on a particular issue. I don't know if it was an LGBTQ issue or whatever.
Yeah.
That's troubling.
Yeah.
You know, I think that goes right to the point of keeping government out of, out of religion.
Yeah. You know, for many years after the founding of this country, the idea of religious symbols and prayer and all that in the public arena was pretty much ignored. I mean, throughout Washington on buildings, the Ten Commandments and the Lord's Prayer and all sorts of things had been there in stone for decades and decades without much of a concern. It seems to me that it wasn't exactly Madalyn Murray O'Hair that sued over the prayer in school. It was somebody else before that.
Yes.
And they won. Her issue was her sons being required to read scripture in school, and that it seemed that and the prayer thing began this thing that snowballed. I know that in 1954 or 5, whenever I was a freshman in high school, and in the boys' glee club, we sang "Onward Christian." It was a public school. We sang "Onward Christian Soldiers" and a hymn called "One God." And I thought it was strange coming from a Catholic school and into what we referred to as a Protestant school that we would be doing that. But as the ball was rolling and starting with prayer in school and reading scripture and then turning on to nativity scenes on public property and all of that. And then to me, probably the most trivial thing of all was the Stowe, Ohio seal, their official seal. As you'll see on the screen, in the upper left-hand corner,
the cross, yeah.
There's a tiny little cross. And apparently this was found so offensive to some people that the ACLU filed a lawsuit against Stowe to remove the cross. And before the suit came alive, the city council decided, it's not worth it, let's change it. So in 1997, I believe, they got rid of that seal. My question, I suppose, is, has there been any negative impact on our culture by eliminating religious practices and images and all that from our public schools? Has there been anything bad of that?
I don't think so. I mean, as a former teacher, you teach values in a class, whether it's, you think of values being part of religion. You teach values. You tell students not to cheat. You try to get them to be honest. To things that are within the purview of your course. And I mean, I was not there to teach religion to my students.
But you did anyway, right?
I taught values.
Yes.
I mean, because you had to. And this is the way you make good people, and it's that non-denominational type of value. You mentioned that seal for Stowe. We're not offended by it because it's a symbol of our religions. It's a cross. I guess if you were not part of that religion, is that intimidating for you to see that?
Or fair.
Or fair, right, exactly.
What if I'm a Hindu?
Right, exactly.
I got a lot of my own symbols if I'm a Hindu.
There are communities which are primarily Muslim. Would people be offended if the city had, well, they wouldn't have a picture of Allah, but had a symbol from that religion?
Well, if you were living in Israel, would you be offended by the Star of David on everything?
Well, probably not, because I'd probably be Jewish.
No.
But again, it's a different country. They don't have that constitution.
Yeah.
They don't have any. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
They don't. Because if they did, it would have to be
You know, and religion
a
is,
Jewish state, and they don't want to identify it.
religion has been used, you know, over the years too. I mean, look at all the wars that were started over religion and the fight over religion. That's not the purpose of faith.
Can you think of any social ill that we have right now that might be cured by reintroducing religion in schools?
Not in the schools, I think in the family. If
Yeah.
families were, you know, we've talked about the family unit before and so forth, and if the family practiced their faith and taught their faith and took the kids to school, you know, to church, not just to school, but they went to church as well and received religious education. But that's not the obligation of the schools. That is the obligation of the parents and the religious community.
Interesting statistic today, an article in the Beacon Journal, that white Christians are now only 43% of the population of Christians.
Oh, really?
Yes, white Christians. Now, among all the faiths in this country, Christianity is still the most prevalent, but there's a very large percentage of people with no denominational affiliation whatsoever. Now, hopefully they will have imbued the values of our society, which I admit come largely from Judeo-Christian tradition, because, as again, they are ways of having a harmonious society, people loving each other and getting on together.
Depending on the way the poll questions are asked, the regular attendance in churches is anywhere between 20% and 40%, depending on how they ask the question. But I think this is an interesting statistics. In the last 20 years, both religious attendance and the crime rate have gone down.
That's scary.
Sounds like we're all a bunch of teenagers rebelling.
But I think that has a lot to do with the baby boomers have gotten older. When they were teenagers, their participation in crime was higher than I don't know what else.
Yeah, I
to
used
say.
to commit a lot more crime when I was younger.
Because of your religion?
Exactly.
Because you had to go to church?
Well, that's a very interesting discussion, and we are not going to end it with a quote because you started with one, which I thought was very good. But thank you very much for a good program. See you in 2 weeks.
Yep.
All right.